All right, Dan, can you just kind of give us your background a little bit for people that don't know you? Just what you do and whatnot.
Well, I am a speaker and I write for two magazines for RDH and for Dental Economics, and I'm a consultant, meaning doctors hire me to come into their practices and help them with the business part of their practices.
Do you still do clinical, or are you kind of done with that?
Well, the only clinical that I do is on a volunteer basis with some like Mission of Mercy and that type thing. So that's the only clinical that I have time to do anymore.
Yeah, I hear you. So today we're going to talk about your book, Diane. I read it over the last few weeks. It's basically a consolidation of. Oh, I'm hearing a feedback on your end a little bit.
I don't know. I'm just sitting here.
All right. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so it's kind of a consolidation of like your articles from 2007 to 2011, and it's kind of organized in a nice format. So you guys, I mean, so you wrote about quite a few things, but I just wanted to focus on three things.
Okay.
So the first thing is what I think a lot of hygienists struggle with is you have a new patient that arrives in the office. They've been seeing somebody else for 5, 10 years, whatever it is. They were never told, well, supposedly they were never told that they had periodontal disease. They come to your office and you have to tell them they have periodontal disease and they need treatment, and they kind of balk at that. And what is the best way to kind of respond to that person or communicate the problem?
Well, I lived this very scenario a number of years ago in the practice where I worked. The dentist, there was a dentist in town who got ill and had to just close his doors, and he never had a hygienist all the years he practiced. He was even my childhood dentist, and we started getting his patients, and invariably every single one that came in had periodontal disease, and they loved this dentist. They'd gone to him for years, and so we had to come up with a way to break the bad news to these people without disparaging that dentist that they loved. And so what we did was we entered a period of discovery with the patient. I like to use that word, and what it amounts to is that I would say to the patient, Mrs. Jones, have you noticed this area bleeding? And I would point to an area, or have you noticed it being swollen or sore? I really was just pointing out what I was seeing in the mouth, and then I could show her with my intraoral camera what I was talking about. But I'm not making any judgments. I'm just saying what I'm seeing today.
Mm-hmm.
And have you had any problems with that bleeding when you brush or anything? So, and I really don't care what she answers. I'm just
Right.
calling attention to what I'm seeing in the mouth. So then, if I determined the patient had periodontal disease, then I would say, well, based on what I see in your mouth, and based on what I see on these x-rays, there's some problems here I'm going to need the doctor to see before I proceed any further.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm like pulling the reins back on this buggy, and so then I say to the patient, I need to go speak to the doctor. So I'm going to leave the patient and go out of the patient's hearing, and I'm going to say to the doctor, I've got this new patient in my chair. She appears to be a class 3 perio. And so he's going to come in. He's not going to do an extensive exam at that point, but he's going to deliver the bad news. And the bad news is she has periodontal disease. Now, if you make a statement like, well, nobody ever told me that before, when a patient says something like that, what the patient is really saying is, I don't know whether I can trust you or not. That's really what they're saying. And on a first visit, that's not an invalid comment from a patient that you haven't had a chance yet to build the trust and respect and the camaraderie. So what I would say to that was, well, we're really glad you came because there have obviously been some changes since the last time you were seen. And I'm not going to say one word about anything in the past because I don't know anything about that. All I know is what I see today, and we're really glad you're here because we can still treat this. And the doctor would even might say, we're really glad you're here because this is still at a treatable stage where we can expect some good results with our treatment.
Right. And I mean, from my experience, I think it's maybe a small percentage or a certain percentage of patients probably have seen a different dentist and was diagnosed with periodontal disease. but maybe they didn't trust that office. They go to your office and they hear the same news, so they kind of expect it, but maybe they're just trying to get a different opinion and like hoping it's just a prophy, but it's not, you know. So I
Yeah.
think it's probably cases like that too.
Yeah, they're just testing you.
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
Um, that's kind of what I do, Diane. I just basically say, I mean, I'm just showing you what I see today. I don't know what they saw 6 months ago, with the implication maybe, you know, like things did change in those 6 months, even though in some cases we know it probably hasn't. You know, it's pretty chronic, you know. But
Well, that's it. And we have to be discerning about how much information do we really need to give this patient. You know, you and I know people don't build those big spicules of calculus in
yeah,
6 months.
right.
We know that. But it's really not helpful and I always say this, patients are not stupid. If
Hmm.
they got substandard care in another office and they get really good care in your office, then they
Hmm.
figure it out.
Yeah. Plus, it could be a situation too where maybe they were treated by a hygienist in a different office that was maybe just out of school, somebody new, and maybe she did get most of the calculus, and maybe she missed something on a distal of 2 or whatever it was. And you know, I mean, I mean, we're not perfect. We do miss things, and and so we see them, and we see them. We say, oh, and you're still bleeding on number 2, and so on, and we diagnose that. Maybe it was just a hygienist that, you know, like all of us, we learned over the years, and we do miss things. So you
That's exactly right.
you know, kind of say the same thing too. You know, so again, I don't know what they saw, blah blah blah. You know, so
Right.
yeah. Um, so next thing, Diane, is the dilemma between the prophy and the perio maintenance. I know a lot of hygienists have issues with that. What is the difference from the patient's perspective? Sometimes they don't feel a difference, like I don't notice a difference of what my hygienist is doing. So what are your thoughts on that? What's the real difference between the two?
Well, I will freely admit that back when I was doing clinical, I struggled with this issue sometimes, but I think we have to understand that for a patient that has gone through definitive periodontal treatment,
Mm-hmm.
then there is a period of time that this patient, they're going to repopulate these pathogens, even though they might not regrow the calculus quickly. And we always have to remember we're fighting an unseen enemy,
Mm-hmm.
that these microbes that we can't see do repopulate, and they do continue to cause problems as time goes on, based on the patient's on host immunity, many different factors, you know, and systemic issues and all that. So for me to be able to determine, well, first of all, I have a rule. I have a rule that if a patient has gone through definitive periodontal therapy,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that this patient needs to be on definitive maintenance for a minimum of 2 years,
Okay.
because the bone and all these things, this does not heal quickly. It's very slow. In fact, I tell hygienists, when you finish your definitive care, you may see some turnaround in the tissue initially in 3 months. You may see some more turnaround in 6 months. You won't really know if you've been successful or not
Mm-hmm.
for about a year. And then even beyond that, sometimes the patient will continue to improve if the factors
Yeah.
are in place. So I say a minimum of 2 years a patient will need to be under maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
because of what I know about how the disease can come back. But I do think that there are some patients who will need maintenance indefinitely because of overwhelming risk factors, like if the patient's a smoker or if the patient
Right.
has diabetes. These are overwhelming risk factors, and they're going to need to be probably on maintenance indefinitely. Sometimes certain systemic issues would require they be on maintenance indefinitely. But
Mm-hmm.
I do think also, Mark, that there are some patients that get to a point where the disease has been under control, the home care is excellent, there are no overwhelming risk factors, the
Mm-hmm.
patient has been stable over time, and that is the central issue. If we've established stability over time, that's it.
Right.
So I'm going to tell the patient, I always want to give my patient hope. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say to my patient, now, for the first year, we know that this is the most critical time after this therapy. These microbes will regrow, and so we're going to need to see you every 3 months. We know from treating many people like you that our long-term success is dependent upon how often we see you.
Yeah.
And so I'll say at the end of the year, we're going to reevaluate everything very thoroughly. And then if we can go beyond 3 months, then that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to give them hope that at some point we can get them back to a prophy. I think that some patients can go back to a prophy and do just fine with it after a period of time. But it's going to vary. And I think hygienists need to be clear in their mind that they're they're fighting an unseen enemy here.
And as far as like the actual treatment itself, you know, if they are still showing, you know, minor signs of disease with the perio maintenance, you're being more thorough with ultrasonic scaling, maybe, you know, irrigating with chlorhexidine or something like that, you know.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because actually I think that based on some of the newer research that has come out, we have better things to irrigate with our perio patients than chlorhexidine. Chlorhexidine has some problems.
Yeah.
It causes calculus to grow faster, it stains, it alters taste, and it doesn't have very long substantivity. However, if the patient's not allergic to iodine, then irrigation with betadine is going to be far a better irrigant choice. It's cheap, and it'll give about 5 weeks of substantivity. That's not something a patient would ever be told to do at home. This is only in office, and I would reserve that particularly for periodontal patients. So that's something different that happens than just with a regular prophy, too.
Yeah. And I would say, too, Diane, as far as, I mean, even with a perio maintenance person, if you're not irrigating, but just with the scaler, you're, you know, taking more time because if they are bleeding, as you know, it's way more difficult to debride when there's bleeding involved. Yes. So there's more time involved, you know, more difficulty. So that's a difference, too. Even if you're just using water, it's still more difficult and more time consuming.
Yes, right? It is. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Let's see. So the next thing, Diana, is the hygiene assistant model or accelerated hygiene. There's all different names out there. For people that don't know what that is, can you explain what that model is?
Oh, I am passionate about this. I love assisted hygiene. I got to practice assisted hygiene a number of years ago, and I thought I'd died and gone to hygiene heaven when I got to do assisted hygiene. First of all, though, I want to just make a statement that what assisted hygiene is not, and I don't like that phrase accelerated hygiene because it really conjures up some unpleasant images in the mind of a hygienist to think she's going to be or he's going to be running around with a lab coat on fire. That's not what it is. It is not hygiene on roller skates. It is not seeing patients every 30 minutes. It is not assistants doing prophies. It is none of that. Assisted hygiene is far, far better use of the hygienist's time. It's it's 4 hands when 4 hands are needed. Often, I mean, we do procedures sometimes that 4 hands would be great. And it's far better productivity and less fighting the clock. I'll tell you, Mark, when I did assisted hygiene, I could see 12 or 13 people, maybe 14 if there were a bunch of children in the mix, in an 8 to 5 day, be less tired at the end of the day than when I saw 8 people by myself.
Right.
So it's just a far, far better way to practice in my book.
Because it's not like you're doing more work in the 8-hour day. You're just doing more of certain things.
That's right. It's learning to delegate those non-productive things that a hygienist has to do. They're essential things like operatory turnover and sterilization and those kinds of things. They're very essential.
Right.
Missing the patient, making the patient's next appointment, all these things, but they're non-productive activities. So with assisted hygiene, I waltzed into the room, my room is set, my tray's set, all my instruments are out, the patient is seated, the patient even has the napkin on. I sit down, the patient's upright, we chat, I go over the medical history, and then, I'm ready to get rolling with the visit, and often my assistant would have already taken any x-rays if I'd said this patient needs x-rays this time. It was wonderful. And so when I was finished, then I would say to my patient, it's been so great to see you today. Now I'm going to turn you back over to Lisa, my assistant. She's going to finish up here, and the doctor's going to come and check, and I'll see you next time.
Right.
I would leave the room and leave the patient with her and go to the next room where that patient's already seated. Everything's laid out for me. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
And I would argue two things in favor. If like the two things that hygienists don't like, that I don't like doing, or just the time for it, is like period charting by yourself. And the second thing is waiting for an exam. If I don't have to wait for an exam and just hop over to the next room, that'd be fantastic.
When I say to hygienists, if I ask 10 hygienists, tell me what is the most stressful part of your day, I guarantee you 8 of those hygienists is going to say waiting for the doctor to come do the exam.
Right.
With assisted hygiene, you don't wait, because your assistant is going to wait with the patient while you go on to the next patient. So that alone.
Right. Exactly. Plus, if you compare it to the dentist, imagine a dentist walking out to the front desk, getting their patient, bringing the patient back, cleaning the room themselves, doing all that themselves. It would be so inefficient. So why shouldn't a hygienist be the same, right?
I've asked dentists, I said, how productive would you be if you had to do everything you do by yourself? And without qualified assistance, a dentist would cut his or her productivity by at least 50%, maybe more than that. So it's the same with hygiene. I think that, but I think some hygienists have gotten a bad perception of what assisted hygiene really is, and I think it can be sabotaged. I've seen the model sabotaged in some offices. Like, for example, one doctor called me. He wanted to set up assisted hygiene in his practice, and so I went to his office. We got everything right, got everybody ready, and it was great. The hygienist loved it. Well, then about 2 weeks later, I went back to this office just to do a visit. And I walked back to the hygiene operatory, and the hygienist was so angry, I could almost see the steam flying out of her ears. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she looked around. She said, "Well, do you see my assistant anywhere?" And I said, "No." "Is she ill?" And she said, "No." She said, "She's down the hall helping them." I said, "Why is she down the hall?" "Because they keep coming and getting her to help them." And so when the doctor came out of his operatory, I said hello to him, and I motioned him into his private office and closed the door. I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "You're sabotaging your model. You can't be pulling this assistant away from her."
Yeah.
So that's when the doctor hires an assistant and says, "Now, honey, you're going to help the hygienist, but you're also going to help us sometimes too." That won't work. It just flat won't work. So that'll sabotage the model. Another thing is if I was in another office where they wanted to do assisted hygiene. The doctors hired me for that purpose, to come in and help them. The front desk person was determined, "We're not doing this here." I mean, she dug her heels in. She said she did not think this was good, and she kind of ran the office somehow. So anyway, there was just really no commitment on his part. He really let her sabotage the model, not having a commitment to make it work. If it had been my decision, I would have said, "Now look, we're going to do this with or without your help. Now we'd like your help, but if you're not willing to get on board with this, then we'll find somebody else who is." Now that would have been my choice. That was not my choice. Another thing is when the front desk does not know how to schedule the model correctly, and overbooking it will sabotage it every time. So they have to know how to schedule it properly. And the fourth thing I would mention is you've got to have two operatories that are mirrored operatories. Everything's in one that's in the other one, and you're not having to drag carts back and forth with like with a power scaler and this kind of thing. No, you have two mirrored operatories that are available, and the schedule is kind of staggered between the two operatories. So those are just some things that can sabotage it.
Yeah, the first office that I worked in, Diane, was out of hygiene school. We had 2 hygiene rooms. We had three part-time hygienists. So most days we had 2 hygienists there, so they were in both rooms. And the doctor wanted to implement this model. I was just out of hygiene school. I was kind of open for it. I said, yeah, that sounds good. But most days you had 2 hygienists, so you didn't have 2 rooms. So I mean, it's not going to work.
No.
Yeah.
No. What he should have done was say, okay, on Monday we're going to let Mark work with an assistant and use 2 operatories, and the other hygienist would be solo. And on Tuesday, we're going to let the other hygienist use the assistant and use 2 operatories, and Mark would be solo. That's what they should let everybody get a chance to do this, but you have to be realistic with this. You can't have 2 people trying to do assisted hygiene with only 3 operatories. It just won't.
Yeah. And well, the other 2 hygienists didn't want to do it at all, so they kind of killed it, but like they give up. But so probably the only negative thing, Diana, I think you mentioned in the book about like say the assistant calls in sick, then you're kind of gonna scramble a little bit, right? That's only probably negative.
Well, if the assistant is ill and can't come into work, then they're going to have to knock 2 or 3 or 4 people off the schedule that day and go back to a solo schedule. A reasonable solo schedule. A hygienist should not be expected to see the same number of patients without her assistant. So
obviously, yeah.
they just have to just readjust the schedule.
All right, the next topic then is malpractice insurance. I'm a good example of a hygienist that doesn't have it yet, that's been wanting to get it, constantly, because I get the offer through the ADHA, whatever they're affiliated with. And I've actually had it on my desk to fill out and send in, but I never do it. But I want to do it. But the big question is, do hygienists need malpractice insurance?
Well, Mark, I think they do. And the reason is, I can give you a couple of good examples why. If there is a lawsuit that charges the doctor with failure to diagnose oral cancer, and the patient and the hygienist also saw the patient, then the hygienist is likely to be named as a co-defendant in a case like that. There have been several cases across the country where the hygienist was named as a co-defendant. Well, the problem is that these failure to diagnose oral cancer cases are often exceed the limits of the doctor's malpractice insurance. So if the hygienist doesn't have any of his or her own, then that pretty much leaves the hygienist out in the cold. So that's one reason to have it. Another reason to have it is, unfortunately, all doctors are not diligent about keeping up their own malpractice insurance. Sometimes they let it lapse. And I know of one state that doesn't even require dentists to carry malpractice insurance. So hygienists sometimes have this false sense of security that, well, I'm covered under the doctor's malpractice as an employer. And that is true to a point. But, there are situations where for example, say the hygienist gets sued by a patient, the doctor does not get named in the suit. But if the hygienist doesn't have any of his or her own malpractice insurance, then the doctor's insurance would probably pay out, if there's a settlement or a penalty or whatever, would probably pay out. But then when it's all over with and the dust settles, then there's nothing to prevent that malpractice carrier from coming back and countersuing that hygienist to recover what they paid out on that person's behalf, because the doctor was not part of the suit, you see. So it is really, I think it's very important in this litigious society we live in to have some malpractice insurance. It's not expensive, Mark. It's usually less than $100 a year.
Yeah, I just actually just got a quote a few days ago just to check it. It was like $60.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
And doctors pay out way, way, way more than that for theirs.
yeah, yeah. Let's see. And you talked about the different kinds of the types of malpractice insurance, and one was the incurrence policy, and the other one was the claims made policy. And
Yeah, one type of insurance will cover even after the person dies. I mean, like if you stop practicing and then the next year after you cease practicing, you pass away or you get killed in a car accident or something, and then maybe sometime after that, the patient files a lawsuit and you get named, even posthumously, you can be sued.
mm-hmm.
And so there's one type that has what is called tail coverage. It's automatic. In other words, it will pay for any claim that is made, even if you've already stopped practicing. Whereas an occurrence policy, I believe that's the occurrence policy just pays while you're currently working. And
Right.
if you retire, then you need to purchase some additional insurance to cover you for a period of time after you retire. I don't know how important it is to have that tail coverage, but I do know of a doctor who was sued after he died. So he did a lot of implants, and one failed, and it was one of those blade type implants. So anyway, there are two types. I think the claims made is probably one is a little bit more expensive than the other. Have you checked the prices on the two?
I just checked the first one, the occurrence policy one. That was the $60 one.
Yeah, I think the occurrence is the cheaper. The claims made will cover even after a person stops practicing.
Okay.
It's a little more expensive.
Yeah. And the last section here, Dianne, my favorite part is the opportunities for hygienists to do things outside clinic. Obviously, people just come out of hygiene school, want to be in the clinic, obviously, but they might have plans right from the beginning, like I want to do something else, or maybe do clinical part-time, or do something else full-time. What are your thoughts about hygienists doing, going outside clinical? What are the opportunities out there? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's individual preference. For me, I started having some pretty serious back trouble, and it came from holding my right arm up, doing hygiene for a lot of years. And I was around 40 years of age, and I started having some pretty serious back troubles. And I thought, if something would happen to my husband and I had to support my children and me, I'm not sure I could do dental hygiene full time and do this. That's really part of the impetus for me to go back to school and get a bachelor's degree. And when I started thinking about what I wanted to do, there had been a consultant that had been in one of the practices where I worked, and she really, really helped our practice a lot. And I kept thinking, I'd really like to do that kind of work, but I didn't have any formal business education. I knew I needed that. So my bachelor's was in human service management, which is a business degree. And at the end of that, I had to narrow my focus and do an internship. And I narrowed my focus to dental practice management. And I did the bulk of my internship with Linda Miles, who many people know as a practice management consultant. She has been my great friend and my mentor for many years. So I think I wanted to stretch and grow. I still love clinical hygiene. I really do. But I think there was a time in my life where I started looking at the long haul and thought, as bad as my back hurts, I don't think I can do this a whole lot longer. That was my impetus for going, and then later went back and got my MBA. So I've got 8 years of college, just like a lot of dentists have. It's just not the same thing. But I think to have credibility, Mark, I think if a hygienist is going to go out of the operatory and get into business, or even if it's working for a company like Patterson or Shine or one of these companies, they usually won't even talk to a hygienist unless he or she has a bachelor degree.
Right.
And if you're going to teach, you really need the masters. And when I got offered a teaching job, I didn't even seek a teaching job. It was kind of dumped in my lap if I wanted it. And I taught 2 different times, 2 different stints of teaching. I love teaching and love the students. And so the more education, I'll tell you this, and I've told many hygienists this, Mark, every time I went back to school and got another degree, my paycheck went up.
That's good.
And I know it costs, there's a cost involved, not only monetary cost, but time and hard work. Some of the programs are internet-based programs and such. You have to be very, very disciplined to be successful in these programs. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the courses I took. I thought cost accounting was going to kill me. But I graduated with a 3.8, in my bachelor program, and so, I just loved the school, and I loved going back to school. I think I'm done now, but I think I've reached the goals that I set for myself.
And I like to emphasize too that, I mean, obviously, especially in dental, I think, like you said, having a bachelor's degree is definitely going to open a lot of doors.
It will.
But I also emphasize a lot of the informal learning that you do on your own. I always make the point about, you pay a school, a hygiene school, whatever that costs. I mean, if it's a private school, it's a lot more. But my school is a state school, so that's probably like 10, 12 grand for the whole thing. So you pay the school to learn, and then on the day you graduate, say you're working, day one, somebody's paying you to work, So there's like a big gap in between. You paying somebody to learn and then somebody paying you to work, right? But you have like there's so much opportunity in between. Like I always give the example. Say you wanted to get into practice management, and you work in a group practice. I mean, you can like get into stuff because you're around patients, you're around operations. You can get into the software and do things. But I think a lot of hygienists have the attitude like, well, they're not paying me to do that. I'm not going to do that, But it's because I mean, it's free work technically, but you're learning. But if you were in a school setting, you'd be paying somebody else to bring in, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I understand completely. When in my very first job in a dental practice, I was front desk.
Right.
And 2 years into that job, one day our lone chairside assistant went to lunch and never came back, ever. And so the doctor said the hygienist had a full schedule, and the doctor said to me, well, Dianne, I think you're going to have to help me. And, I mean, I had to jump in the water without a life jacket, and but it was hard work learning to be a chairside assistant and then still trying to run up front and answer the phone, check people out and all these things. I did that for about 2 months until he hired somebody else. I thought I was going to go crazy. But I learned so much. Oh, my gosh, I learned so much.
Right.
And it really benefited me. And so the next job after I went to hygiene school, went to work for a dentist, a little small dental practice. So if his chairside assistant was sick, guess what? They canceled my patients, and I helped him.
Right.
I loved it. I really did. Just loved it. Yeah. So everything you look at it like, oh my gosh, I don't like this hard work or whatever. Just reframe it in your mind. It can be a fabulous learning experience for you.
Right. Plus, like you mentioned, Dianne, about the teaching, like things. If you kind of get out there and do things, and from, I would say most of the things will be free. If you're writing or blogging or whatever you're doing. Things kind of tend to come to you. Like a lot of these jobs, like being a teacher, being a consultant or whatever, nobody's putting an ad on Craigslist, looking for a hygienist that's willing to be a consultant,
That's right.
It's like stuff you have to either create yourself or things come to you because you're already out there in some ways.
Well, as far as being a consultant, Linda told me a long time ago, she said, Dianne, doctors won't hire you without some credibility. You have to build your credibility, and that is probably the hardest thing to do. It's harder than going to school and taking courses and turning in papers and writing research papers.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how do I build a credibility? And she said, well, you need to be published. And I said, well, what do I write about? And she said, well, you write about what you're passionate about. And so I wrote 4 articles to start with and submitted. She said, don't get discouraged if the first thing you write is not accepted.
Right.
The fourth thing that I sent to Joe Blaze at Dental Economics, he took it.
Yeah.
And that's what really started the ball rolling. Now, I love to write. I mean, when I write a piece, it's like, this is my baby. I've created it.
Right.
It's mine.
Yeah.
And so I found that I had this real love for writing, but the writing, I don't know how anybody can build credibility if they don't write.
I agree.
You know, that has been Penwell with Dental Economics, and then later with RDH magazine, gave me this, I call it my national pulpit. You know, they've given me a voice.
Yeah.
And I've never, ever, ever missed a writer deadline. You know, I don't see it. I see it as a great opportunity.
Plus, it's a learning experience for you. Like, if you're writing about something, you do some research on that topic, and you're learning anyway in the process, so you're benefiting from that too. So.
And just when I think I've seen and heard it all, I mean, I've been writing every month for them since 1997. Just when I think I've seen and heard it all, something new comes across my desk. Oh my gosh! And so I'll have to research it and talk to attorneys and talk to different specialties and this and that. So it's always something new.
Plus, in today's world with the internet, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if employers, like, if they receive a resume or whatever, and they Google your name, and they don't see you anywhere. And, you know, it's like, okay, where's this person on? You know, they're not online, they're not on any forums or anything. You know. Yeah. So that might help too. I'm just getting a clinical job, but.
Well, I'll tell you, dental hygienists and really everybody should be real careful what they put out there on Facebook, because today's employers, when they are looking for somebody, one of the first things they do is go plug that person's name in Facebook to see if there's a Facebook persona there.
Yeah, the real person. All right, Dan, thanks for doing this again. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to throw out there?
Well, I just want to say that dentistry is going through some major shifts right now. There are many changes today, and I think dental hygienists need to be smart, and they need to understand that their job is not about them. That their job is about helping people, and the value that a dental hygienist brings to a business where he or she is privileged to be employed. That's the way they need to look at their job and see it as a career and grow and learn, be the constant learner, gathering all this new information that comes down the pipe, stay current. I think that we're going to see still some big changes in the coming years, and I see good things for dental hygiene. Yeah,
I think hygiene is going to be probably more open to the public, maybe in different settings, legal wise, they can get out there, so that'd be nice.
Yeah.
Also, too, Dan, I think hygienists in general should have more sympathy for dentists that have a lot of stress, especially a small practice. I think a lot of hygienists don't understand the stress they have, their responsibility, and so.
We all tend to be a little self-centered at times, but I'll tell you, when I started my consulting business and really got to see some of the very sensitive financial information from practices, Mark, I got to tell you, the first practice I ever consulted, the doctor had not taken a paycheck from his practice in 9 months.
Yeah, I believe it.
In such bad financial shape. Now, he didn't want his staff to know it. I mean, they all got paid. They didn't know that he was in that terrible financial shape. And it wasn't because he was a mismanager or any of that. It was just that his practice had grown old and frail, kind of like a person gets old and frail. Well, his practice had grown that way.
Yeah.
And he was a great guy. And it was such an eye-opening thing for me. They were living off of his wife's salary as a dental hygiene instructor.
Yeah.
Oh my! So I've seen some real pitiful kinds of things like that, and it gave me a new respect for doctors who really have some business sense about them and know how to run a business well.
Yeah. One last question, Diane. I just thought of, because it's a big question too. when hygienists want to raise, sometimes they want to raise only because they've been breathing for another year, right? I mean, what is the best way to approach? I know the standard is 3 times your cost, right? Is that kind of the best way to approach it? To see what your production is, and then kind of base it on that.
Well, I've been asked this question hundreds of times, Mark, and I need a raise. And, I say to hygienists, well, first of all, you need to know your numbers. You need to know your salary to production ratio. And your salary to production, when I say that, I'll say to hygienists, do you monitor your production? And sometimes they'll turn red in the face. Well, that's not my job, Exactly. I just know I work hard here, and I haven't had, and they get real defensive about it. And I say, well, okay, you have to have a reason, though. You need to know the value you bring to the practice, other than just showing up and doing profies every day.
Right.
You need to know your salary to production ratio, and you need to build a case for yourself about what else could you do that might bring more value to the practice. I ask hygienists this all the time. I say, do you have your perio radar engaged?
Right.
Because I'll look at the printout from the codes and I'll see, okay, hygienist A in the month of July did 200 people. And there were only 2 perio codes in the whole month. So I'm thinking, okay, am I supposed to think, is it reasonable to assume that not one of those 200 patients had at least one pocket or something? I say, get your perio radar engaged, and you will find what you're not looking for, So is the procedure mix where it ought to be? Are there enough perio codes in there? I'm not suggesting that hygienists are lazy or what, but I think they get in a little comfort zone sometimes. They just kind of go about their business, and they're not really, really engaged with the patient. So they need to be good at talking to people, how to usher them into. And the other thing, Mark, this is a big one. The other thing that a hygienist can really bring a lot of value to a practice is this hygienist's ability to promote the doctor's dentistry.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, that is huge. And I'll say this. I mean, when I've run across a few hygienists that are absolute superstars at promoting the doctor's dentistry, Ray's, oh, buddy, you better believe it. Because people like that don't come along every day.
Yeah. And
some hygienists are very, very good at promoting the doctor's dentistry, which makes it so easy when the doctor comes in the room and this patient's got this old broken down tooth that needs a crown. Hygienist has already set the patient up for it. Doctor says, yep, it needs a crown. Okay, let's get it scheduled. That's valuable.
Exactly.
But hygienists will say to me, they'll say things to me like, well, selling dentistry is not my job, and this kind of thing. You don't get it. You just don't get
it. Because they see it as a dirty car salesman. That's what they picture. They see it as selling something that the patient doesn't need.
Well, I would never advocate.
Right. Yeah.
I would never ever advocate trying to push dentistry that is not needed.
Right.
But when there are needs, I mean, sometimes you got hygienists that are real good at chit chatting, but they don't give it enough dental focus here. Right. They've got to be promoters of the business.
Right. Because a lot of cases the patient is just thinking they don't need it, or they don't see the value in getting a crown on a big amalgam filling or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But so the hygienist is there to educate and inform and persuade, not to persuade to do something wrong. It's a good thing for the patient,
Yes.
So it's not like it's a negative thing. And people see, they should read that book, Daniel Pink, The Cell is Human. That's a really good book.
Oh, I haven't read it, but maybe I should.
Yeah, that's a good book. So
thanks for recommending that.
I mean, his point is that we sell every day. Even if it's not a money transaction, just if we're trying to get, I don't know, whatever, like a friend to do something, you're selling. It's all selling. It's all persuading. It's not a bad word.
Yes.
All right, Dan. Yeah, thanks again. I'm gonna have this up in a couple of weeks. I'll have your link to your website and all that on there too in the blog post. And have fun on vacation.
Well, thanks a lot, and thanks
Yeah,
for asking me to do this. I've been telling people about your attachment for the suction.
yeah, yeah,
I have it in my perio lecture. I'm going to be lecturing next Friday in Wilmington, and it's right there. I tell people I'm really excited to share this with you because I want hygienists to keep
yeah,
the aerosols down. I want them to use that high volume suction.
yeah. And this blog that I'm doing, Diane, and all this, I want to kind of highlight hygienists for the most part that are doing things outside clinic and different and all that.
Yeah,
And it's fun to talk about stuff like this too. So,
it is.
yeah. All right, Dan. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. All
All
right.
right.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.